I should have known Tessa wouldn't go down quietly. I had naively assumed that once our marriage ended, we would part ways and move on with our lives. But Tessa had other plans. Plans that involved dragging me through the court system in an attempt to drain me of everything I had. When I was first served with legal papers, I wasn't entirely shocked. Tessa had always been calculating, always playing the long game. But when I read through her demands, I nearly laughed out loud. This wasn't just a fair settlement she was after. She wanted half of my assets, alimony for life, and even a portion of my retirement fund. Her reasoning? Derek abandoned me. He ruined my life. I deserve compensation for the suffering he caused. Suffering. That's what she called it. If you had met Tessa before all this, you'd think she was charming, elegant, and sophisticated. She knew exactly how to work a room, how to make people believe she was sweet and helpless. And that's precisely what made her dangerous. Tessa didn't just lie. She built entire alternate realities and was disturbingly good at it. Throughout our marriage, she played the role of a supportive wife, always smiling in public, always standing by my side like the perfect partner. But behind closed doors, she was a financial wrecking ball. Derek, you're the provider, she'd say dismissively whenever I suggested she find a job. You should want to take care of me. A real husband wouldn't make his wife worry about money. So I worked long hours, built a solid career, provided her with everything she could ever need. But it was never enough. Tessa never worked, never contributed, never once acknowledged that marriage was supposed to be a partnership. And when things didn't go her way, she turned into a master manipulator. When I finally had enough and filed for divorce, she lost it. You're ruining my life. She screamed when I broke the news. After everything I've done for you, I gave you the best years of my life, and you're just throwing me away like garbage. I stood firm. No, Tessa, I said, my voice calm despite the storm of emotions raging in front of me. I'm not throwing you away. I'm escaping. Our split should have been simple. We had no kids, no shared business, and we had signed a fair prenuptial agreement before the wedding. But for Tessa, that wasn't enough. You're selfish. She spat at me during one of our final arguments. You don't even care about what you're doing to me. I didn't respond. There was no point in arguing with someone who rewrote history to suit her own narrative. And when our divorce was finalized, I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. That was when Tessa started plotting her revenge. When I walked into the courtroom for the first hearing, I expected at least a pretense of civility, but I should have known better. She sat across from me, her head held high, smirking like she had already won. She wore a designer dress, one I vaguely remembered paying for, pearl earrings, and that expensive handbag she had once claimed she would sell because she wasn't materialistic. The moment she saw me, she didn't look angry, hurt, or anxious. No, Tessa looked amused. She locked eyes with me, leaned toward her lawyer, and whispered something before flashing a slow, knowing smile, like this was all some elaborate game and she was already 3 moves ahead. Her lawyer, a middle-aged man with an air of practiced sympathy, stood up first. His voice was smooth, dripping with manufactured concern. Your Honor, my client has suffered severe emotional and financial distress due to Mr. Vaughn's abandonment. Abandonment. That was the word they were going with. She was left with nothing, he continued, pacing slowly. A devoted wife relying on her husband's financial support, only to be discarded without warning. She dedicated years of her life to this marriage, sacrificed her own career, her own ambitions, and now she's been left struggling to rebuild while Mr. Vaughn moves on without a second thought. I nearly laughed out loud. The truth? Tessa had never been abandoned. She had full access to a bank account with more than enough money to restart her life. She had been given a generous settlement in the divorce, a settlement she had agreed to, but fair had never been enough for Tessa. She didn't just want her share. She wanted everything. Her lawyer kept going, throwing out every emotional buzzword he could think of. She sacrificed her career for him. She never had one. Asterisk, she supported his ambitions. Asterisk, by spending my money. Asterisk, she deserves proper compensation. Asterisk, for what exactly? When he finally sat down, there was a moment of silence in the courtroom. Then, as if on cue, Tessa leaned back in her chair, crossed her legs, and smiled. She thought she had me, but she had no idea what was coming, because I knew something she didn't. Something that would destroy her entire case. Weeks ago, Ron Jeremy, my lawyer, had uncovered something shocking. When he called me into his office, he gestured toward his screen. Asterisk, Derek, have you ever seen this document before? Asterisk, I leaned over, eyes scanning the screen. It was a marriage record. At first, I was confused. Why was he showing me our marriage record? But then I noticed the date. It was from years before I had even met Tessa. And the name next to hers? Jared Foster. A sinking feeling settled in my gut. Asterisk, are you saying she was married before? Asterisk, Ron exhaled sharply. Asterisk, not just married. Asterisk, he pointed at another section of the document. Asterisk, there's no record of divorce. Asterisk, silence. My pulse pounded in my ears. My eyes flicked between the names, the dates, searching for anything. Asterisk, anything, asterisk. That might prove this wasn't what it looked like. Asterisk, wait. So you're telling me Tessa was still legally married when she married me? Asterisk. Ron nodded grimly. I sat back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Holy! Ron rubbed his chin, already thinking a step ahead. Asterisk, this changes everything. Asterisk, my voice sounded distant. Asterisk, how? Asterisk, he looked me in the eye. Asterisk, think about it, Derek. If she was never legally divorced. Asterisk, he let the words hang in the air before finishing. Asterisk, then your marriage to her was never valid. Asterisk, I stared at him. If our marriage was never legal, then she had zero legal claim to my money. Every demand she had made, every accusation, her entire case was built on a lie. Once the judge found out, her entire scam would come crashing down. I turned to Ron. Asterisk, so what do we do with this? Asterisk, he smirked. Asterisk, we sit on it. Asterisk, I frowned. Asterisk, shouldn't we submit it to the court now? Asterisk, no, he said, leaning back in his chair. Asterisk, if we do that, she'll have time to come up with excuses. She'll claim she didn't know, that she forgot, or spin whatever nonsense she thinks will save her. Asterisk, I nodded slowly, seeing where he was going with this. Asterisk, but if we drop this bomb while she's under oath, when she's already fully committed to her lies, she won't be able to talk her way out of it. Asterisk, we were going to let Tessa dig her own grave. She wanted a war. She was about to get one. The courtroom was thick with tension as Tessa sat before the judge, her expression carefully composed yet undeniably theatrical. She had perfected this act, a performance designed to evoke sympathy, and for a moment it seemed to be working. He threw me away like I was nothing, she choked out, a well-rehearsed sob punctuating her words. The judge, an older man with a stern face, nodded while jotting down notes. I caught the shift, a brief flicker of sympathy. She was good, I had to admit. She knew how to manipulate an audience. Tessa exhaled as if relieved, as if she had already won. But then, the judge's sharp gaze turned to me. Mr. Vov, do you have anything to say in response to these claims? I glanced at Ron, my attorney. He gave me a small, reassuring nod. Stick to the plan. I met the judge's gaze and kept my voice steady. Your Honor, I did not abandon Tessa. In fact, she received a fair settlement during our divorce. She was given financial support, which she recklessly spent. This case is not about fairness. It's about greed. Tessa let out a dramatic gasp, her performance escalating. Greed? I gave you everything. The judge held up a hand, silencing her. Tessa clamped her mouth shut, but crossed her arms, glaring at me like I had wronged her. Ron stood, buttoning his jacket. Your Honor, before we proceed further, I'd like to cross-examine Mrs. Smith. The judge nodded. Proceed. Ron walked over to the table in front of us, picking up a thick stack of documents. He flipped through them before looking up at Tessa with an almost casual expression. "Mrs. Smith, is it true that you had full access to a shared bank account after your divorce?" Tessa sniffled, still clinging to the role of a heartbroken ex-wife. It wasn't enough to live on. Ron arched a brow and held up one of the documents. "And yet, records show that in the first 3 months after your divorce, you spent over $10,000 on luxury handbags, vacations, and spa treatments." He paused, letting the words settle. "Would you like to explain that?" A flicker of irritation crossed her face, but she quickly recovered, flipping her hair over one shoulder. "Self-care is important, Mr. Paul." A few people in the courtroom chuckled. Even the judge smirked slightly. But I wasn't watching them, I was watching her. Tessa didn't look nervous, not even slightly, because she thought this was just about money. She thought the worst that could happen was that she wouldn't get as much as she wanted. She had no idea what was coming. The judge leaned back in his chair. "All right, I've heard both sides. I'm ready to make a ruling." Tessa straightened, smoothing her dress. Then she smiled, actually smiled, like she had already won. And that's when Ron stood up one last time. "Your Honor, before you rule, there's something she hasn't told you." The room went silent. For the first time that day, Tessa's confidence wavered. Her face twitched with uncertainty. The judge narrowed his eyes. "Mr. Jeremy, what exactly are you referring to?" Ron calmly reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "We recently uncovered some interesting documents regarding Mrs. Smith's marital history." Tessa stiffened. Ron flipped open the folder, carefully removing a certified marriage record. He turned it toward the judge. "Your Honor, Tessa Smith was never legally married to my client." The entire courtroom froze. You could hear the faint scratching of a pen abruptly stop as the judge halted mid-sentence. The air was thick, charged with the weight of an impending downfall. Tessa's jaw dropped. Her perfectly poised demeanor shattered in an instant. That's not true," she stammered. Ron didn't flinch. With almost casual ease, he slid the stack of documents across the judge's bench. "This is a certified record, Your Honor," he said smoothly. "It shows that Mrs. Tessa Foster was legally married to another man, Jared Foster, at the time she supposedly married my client." A ripple of murmurs spread through the courtroom. Even Tessa's own lawyer, Eugene Peru, looked blindsided. He leaned toward her, whispering urgently, but she barely seemed to hear him. Her fingers clawed at the edge of the table, as though she could physically hold on to the life she had built on lies. The judge flipped through the documents, his frown deepening. Ron continued, his voice unwavering. "There is no record of a legal divorce for Mr. Foster. So tell me, Mrs. Foster," he emphasized her last name with a hint of mockery, "how exactly were you planning to claim alimony from a marriage that never legally existed?" Tessa's face drained of all color. She looked like a ghost of the woman who had strutted into courtroom so confidently just moments ago. This is a mistake," she gasped. "I didn't know." Ron arched an eyebrow. "You know?" His tone was incredulous but controlled, like he was speaking to a child caught with their hand in the cookie jar. He picked up another document from the stack. "Because according to these records, you and Mr. Foster owned the property together 5 years ago." He held up the document for effect. "You signed a lease. That doesn't sound like not knowing." Tessa swallowed hard. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably beside her, clearly trying to formulate some kind of defense. But even he looked like he knew this was game over. The judge set the documents down carefully, as if handling a loaded gun. Then he looked up, his sharp eyes locking onto Tessa, like a predator closing in on its prey. "Mrs. Smith," he said, his voice measured but cold, "is this true?" Tessa opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. Nothing came out. The judge's gaze was heavy, unrelenting. "Mrs. Smith," he repeated, his tone dangerously calm, "answer the question." She swallowed hard. "I didn't think it mattered." The judge's expression darkened. "You didn't think it mattered?" His voice was so sharp it made her flinch. The silence in the room was suffocating. The judge exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "Mrs. Smith, do you have any idea what you've done here?" Tessa tried again. Your Honor, The judge cut her off with a look that could have frozen hell itself. No, you don't speak. You listen. She froze. You came into this courtroom under oath and knowingly built your case on a lie. His voice was steady but laced with barely concealed anger. You wasted this court's time. You wasted Mr. Vov's time. And worst of all, you tried to manipulate the legal system for your own personal gain. Tessa turned to her lawyer, pleading, Eugene, you can fix this, right? Peru calmly stood, adjusting his suit jacket. Your Honor, in light of this revelation, I am formally withdrawing from this case. Tessa let out a choked sound. Wait, no, you can't just leave. Bang. The judge's gavel slammed down. Mrs. Smith, sit down. Tessa whimpered and sank back into her seat. The judge let out a slow breath, clearly reining in his frustration. Given the circumstances, this case is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, Mrs. Smith will cover all legal fees incurred by Mr. Vov. Tessa's head snapped up. No, Your Honor, please. But the judge didn't acknowledge her. The verdict was final. And just like that, the game she had so carefully played was over.